The Lean Scrum Analytics Dashboard, or LSAD for short, is the sister tool of the LAD. It is similar to the LAD in that it's helping you understand process flow and areas of improvement, but it's specific to Scrum teams. It pulls its data from Scrum boards rather than via Jira filters. Here are some high-level features and capabilities. Like the LAD, it's built on top of the enhanced Jira query engine. It also has the configurable 4 and 16 panel dashboards. The LSAD also has interactive enhanced sprint burn down and sprint reports. I'll demonstrate what I mean by enhanced when we go through the tool in a minute. Additionally, the LSAD can do analysis on individual teams or groups of teams. And again, like the LAD, it has automated execution and easily scales to fit large information radiators. So we're in the Lean Analytics Scrum dashboard. This is the simple dashboard, same as the LAD in terms of the layout, 4x4 with the key indicators in the corners. The detailed dashboard, exactly the same as the LAD in terms of the layout. The big difference is obviously the metrics themselves. These are very specific to Scrum teams. So for instance, this one here in the lower left, planned issues versus WIP to issue ratio. That's indicating is the team working on a small number of issues at a time versus throwing them all in the process at once. Over here, you have percent of issues completed 100% within the sprint. So in other words, where issues started and completed in the sprint versus things that rolled in from a previous sprint or rolled over to a next sprint. So these are very specific to Scrum teams and how they work. The other thing you'll notice is that if you hover over the titles, it will give you an explanation of what each of these exhibits are about. The exhibit gallery is a bit different. So its purpose is the same. It's here to show you all the different title or all the different metrics and charts within the tool. But one, it's single column, and two, you have explanation of each one of the charts, so you understand what it's doing and how to use it. In addition to those, there's also a single chart. So you may want to look at a certain metric, but if you don't already have it on one of your dashboards, you'd have to go and change the configuration to put that on and rerun it. It's kind of a pain if you just want it, kind of a one-off. So I put this in here that allows you to select a single chart as well as a key indicator, and then you can just come up here and build the dashboard, and you just build the single metric dashboard. So it gives you a quick way of getting a single metric without having to do a lot of reconfiguration. All right, so I mentioned in the so I mentioned earlier that this also has a enhanced burn down chart and sprint report. So let's take a look at those. So here's the burn down chart. And so the red line is your typical burn down line you'd see on any burn down chart, with the gray line being the ideal burn down line. But you'll also notice it has this green line here, which is a WIP limit that can be set through configuration. And then the bars indicate the WIP on each day of the sprint. So blue indicates that the team is within the daily WIP limit, and red indicates that they're exceeding the WIP limit. So it gives you a real easy way to see if you're starting to get above where you want to be in terms of your WIP and how that compares to your burn down and how you're progressing through the sprint. It's also interactive, so it will default to whatever the current sprint is. In this case, I don't have a current sprint going, but you can also look at historical sprints. So just by clicking on the drop down, you can see any sprint that you have in the data set that you selected. The sprint report also is interactive. So I can see both current and historical sprints. And if you look at the first part of the report, it looks pretty typical. You see, Jira has all this in here in terms of the sprint info and the key and the summary and all that issue type. Where you start to see a difference is as you scroll through the report, you'll see additional data items that you just won't see in Jira. For instance, planning status. Was this a planned or unplanned? In other words, was it added after the sprint started, or was it planned and added before? Was it ever blocked? the cycle time of the issue, any hidden WIP, was the issue completed 100% within the sprint. So it gives you a lot more information than a typical sprint report does. All right. Sorry, I misspoke there. I think planning status is actually something that is in the Jira report. Just wanted to clear that up. Okay, so let's take a look at the configurations. So the configurations compared to the LAD are slightly different. In the LAD, you have the workflow configurations. You see those here. But in the LAD, what we call the query configurations are now called team configurations. So they're basically the same thing. They're referring to them as teams because we're working in teams versus in the boards versus queries. Right? So the teams tab is the equivalent to the queries tab in the LAD and in the enhanced Jira query tool. So again, I won't go through all these in detail, but it just specifies specifics of each particular team. You also have report configurations. This is where there's a distinct difference between the LAD and the LSAD. So the Scrum Analytics dashboard allows you to not only look at individual teams, it allows you to look at groups of teams. So in the report configurations, we specify a report which is one or more teams. So in this case, I'm just looking at a single team. If you look over here on the reports, I have several different report configurations set up. One for the Android cloud or Android team using Jira Cloud. I have another one for the iOS team using Jira Cloud, and I have this one called Group Mobile, which is a combination of the two. So if I go back here and switch to that group, you see over here it's loaded up those configurations, and this one is set up to have two teams. So what it's doing is we'll pull in the data for both those teams, and we can get aggregate metrics now for both those teams. So I've got a group spreadsheet set up here. You don't have to set up a separate spreadsheet, but just in the interest of time, I didn't want to have to go back and rerun and pull all the data again. So if we go and look at the simple dashboard, this is now showing metrics for both those teams. Now, not all metrics are going to apply, right? So you wouldn't want to use a sprint level metric in a situation like this where you're looking at aggregate data. So these are set up in a way that they're aggregated. So this is looking at weekly completed versus incomplete issues. So teams are all going to have different sprint cycles, right? They're going to start on different days and end on different days. So what we're doing here is we're on a week-by-week basis summing up those metrics for the teams that have, for instance, finished sprints in that week. You can also do this on a monthly level as well. So it lets you, see things at an aggregate view. Now, when you're looking at these, obviously, we're looking at things like percentages and trends because those still apply. You would want to, for instance, try to compare, teams' velocity. It's not applicable. So not all the metrics are going to apply, but when you're using trends and you're using percentages, they absolutely can apply. So, for instance, how is my group, my department, whatever your organization happens to be, how is it doing at an aggregate level with all the teams that I have in it versus individual teams? So it lets you keep an eye on the big picture and hopefully stay away from getting myopic and getting into like local optimal problems where teams are all focusing on just their issues versus a combination of how are we improving as a team, how are we improving as a group, how are we improving as a department, and really that systems thinking kind of approach. In addition to the aggregate metrics, you still get the sprint and burn down reports, but you get it for all the teams that you have in your report configuration. So here I have it for 2 different teams, so I can at my fingertips just click to any team sprint that I want that I happen to have in here. So it's a nice tool to have in terms of seeing the big picture and being able to drill down into more detail. Okay, so that's it.